All four of the former Minneapolis police officers connected to the death of George Floyd have been charged. Derek Chauvin was the officer who knelt on Floyd's neck. His previous charges were upgraded Wednesday to second-degree murder. The other three officers at the scene have now been charged for the first time. They're facing aiding and abetting unintentional murder and second-degree manslaughter. Floyd's family visited the site of his death in Minneapolis Wednesday. His son Quincy gave an emotional plea for justice, telling supporters, quote, "No man or woman should be without their fathers." Meanwhile, protests continued across the U.S. Demonstrators in New York City defied a citywide curfew Tuesday. They crossed the Manhattan Bridge despite police efforts to block access, but the city reported fewer arrests and less violence than nights before. And in Washington, D.C., hundreds of protesters marched to Capitol Hill Wednesday, calling for an end to police brutality. They observed a moment of silence, laying down with their hands painted red and held behind their backs. Skyler Henry has the latest from Minneapolis.
The crowd let out a cheer, hearing that former police officer Derek Chauvin is now facing second-degree murder charges in the death of George Floyd. The three other officers involved in Floyd's arrest are also now charged. The news came just hours after Floyd's son arrived at the spot where his 46-year-old father died and knelt in prayer.
I appreciate everyone for showing him some support and love. I thank y'all for that.
Former NBA player Royce White has emerged as one of the city's protest leaders.
There's going to be a day where George Floyd's children decide to watch the video of that cop kneeling on his neck. And if you can imagine that moment, then there's no way that you shouldn't take to the streets.
In Seattle, peaceful protests took a turn last night when demonstrators clashed with police. But in California, most recent demonstrations were mostly peaceful.
Black Lives Matter!
In New York, protesters defied the 8 p.m. curfew, but the mayor says the city did not see the widespread looting and vandalism from previous nights.
Overwhelmingly, it was a very different reality in New York City last night.
The Minneapolis Police Department is now under investigation for discriminatory practices, but activists say that does not give them solace.
Why is that? None whatsoever. I don't trust the state. I don't trust people to investigate themselves.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz visited Floyd's memorial Wednesday morning using chalk to write "Justice Now."
And Skyler Henry joins me now. Skyler, as we saw, all four officers were charged in Floyd's death. Paint the scene for us there on the ground. What kind of an impact might this have on the movement nationwide?
Hey, Elaine, good evening to you. Well, what I can tell you is that it's been seemingly joyous so far, ever since that news was announced a few, let's call it an hour ago, but still so many people said that there is still a lot of work left to be done. Now, maybe 5 to 10 minutes ago, George Floyd's family was actually right over here announcing a press conference saying that they had their support and they were appreciative of how many people had come out here to show love for George Floyd. But again, they were adamant about making sure that this is not the end of the road in terms of the charges for these police officers. Now, what I can show you behind me is that there is still a growing memorial for George Floyd. Obviously, this latest memorial here, the black and white painting here, is actually something that just went up yesterday, and it just shows how many people have come out here to show their love and respect for George Floyd. And I can tell you this too, we spoke with several demonstrators as well who have seen the incidents that have happened across the country, the violent incidents, I should say, and they aren't happy about it. They wanted to make sure that they paid their respects properly to George Floyd, and they wanted to do so peacefully as well. And I think that can be said since we've been here for the last couple of days.
And Skyler, we did see some violent clashes there over the weekend. Has the atmosphere changed at all?
Well, for the most part, it's been relatively peaceful here, as I said before, Elaine, but I will say this, it is still relatively tense in certain times of day. Over the nighttime, there is a different crowd, so to speak. There is I would say, more so people just coming to pay their respects throughout the day, but at nighttime, let's just call them a little bit more passionate at nighttime as well. Still a little bit more aggressive when it comes to making sure people pay their respects to George Floyd. But again, it's been relatively peaceful since we've been here. We've seen nothing like we've seen over the last week across the country here in Minneapolis altogether.
And Skyler, we have seen demonstrations in all 50 states in the wake of George Floyd's death. In your conversations with people who have come out to protest, what do they say about the magnitude of all of these folks coming out in the wake of one person's death after this encounter with police?
Well, you know, that's the interesting thing, Elaine. I think what this moment has been ultimately is a culmination of frustration that has been built up for so many people for so long. There's been talk of obviously the injustice from the police department of people of color for years, if not decades. But now that it has been shown on screen after screen, I think there's a significant group of people who have said enough is simply enough, and they can't simply stand for it anymore. Like in the piece that we showed earlier today, former NBA star Royce White echoed just that. He's from Minneapolis, and he said there was something different about this video that really stuck with him, just to show the 9 minutes, that Officer Chauvin had on George Floyd's neck that really stuck out to him. And I think that is a ripple effect, essentially, that has spread from not only here to Minneapolis, but across the country and around the world.
All right, Skyler Henry for us. Skyler, thank you very much.